On November 20th, 1944, a desperate secret weapon was unleashed beneath the waves, carrying a man and the ashes of his friend towards a fiery destiny. But the haunting story behind its creation, and the tragic price of its ultimate sacrifice, reveals a far darker truth. It is November 20th, 1944. Beneath the waves of the Philippine Sea, an Imperial Japanese Navy I-47 submarine navigates through the dark depths. It is on a deadly mission, carrying a fateful cargo, 4 secret weapons. Inside the I-47, Lieutenant Sekio Nishina stares at the ashes of his old friend, steeling himself for what is to come. The captain informs him they have reached their destination. He carefully holds the urn as he walks towards his destiny. The open hatch above seems like a gateway to his final journey, into a weapon he designed himself, a weapon intended to turn the tide of the war. Nishina climbs in, taking his place in the cockpit. Countless hours of hard work are evident in every detail of this machine, his own creation, which will send him on a one-way mission, the Kaiten, a manned torpedo. The Kaiten is on a secret mission to use this elusive underwater weapon to sink U.S. Navy ships anchored near Ulithi Atoll. Nishina carefully places his friend's urn and expertly checks all the gauges, valves, and levers. He can't help but admire his creation. We have built something magnificent. He picks up the phone to speak with the submarine captain, who informs him that the targets are anchored 7.2 kilometers ahead. It has been an honor. The Kaiten are released from the submarine's mothership. Each is automatically guided and aligned towards the bearing set by their rudimentary autopilots. Their speed is impressive. They are currently the fastest manned submersibles in the world. Each Kaiten follows a slightly different route, surfacing approximately 800 meters from their target before using their periscopes to determine the final bearing. Nishina looks through the periscope and spots multiple targets. A spectacular sight unfolds directly before him. Several American ships. They appear to be easy prey. He targets the largest vessel and accelerates. For honor, to a glorious victory. As they race towards their targets, one of the Kaiten runs aground on a sandbank. A tremendous explosion erupts. "Did you hear that? We're under attack. I can't see anything." And the Americans now know something is amiss. Sailors rush to the ship's rails, scanning the waters, but can discern nothing. In his Kaiten, Nishina carefully maneuvers through the shallow waters, avoiding getting stuck. He retracts his periscope to remain undetected, essentially navigating blind. Another Kaiten is hit, this time by depth charges. The Americans rush to their battle stations but still cannot locate the enemy. Nishina raises his periscope, spots his target, and adjusts his course once more. The USS Mississinewa, a colossal tanker, fills his view. He maneuvers towards it, aiming precisely for its center. A short distance away, the third Kaiten becomes entangled in a torpedo net. Its engine strains, emitting black smoke that alerts the enemy. American forces spot the periscope of the trapped Kaiten, open fire, and the relatively small submersible is torn to pieces. Nishina hopes they haven't seen him. He is so close, he can almost feel it. The submersible gains speed, gliding faster and faster through the water, the target drawing ever nearer. With what he believes to be his last breath, he casts one final glance at his friend's remains, as his life flashes before his eyes. In June 1942, Ensign Nishina received grim news from his superiors. The fiercely contested Battle of Midway had not ended in a stalemate, as portrayed in Japanese news, but in a complete catastrophe for Japan. The battle had annihilated 4 of Japan's 6 best aircraft carriers, and tragically, the majority of Japan's elite naval aviators perished. Every advantage Japan had gained since the war began 7 months prior was now obliterated. Even more alarming was the fact that U.S. power seemed to grow with each passing month. The future looked bleak, and a decisive victory for Japan appeared impossible. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and he befriended another pilot, Lieutenant Hiroshi Kuroki. The idea was for small, inconspicuous submarines to approach the enemy, fire torpedoes, and then escape silently. However, these mini-submarines were largely obsolete. American sonar effectively turned them into underwater coffins, and their difficult-to-aim torpedoes meant even successful infiltrations were doomed to fail. With success chances approaching zero, the men pondered, why be shot down without sinking even a single ship? You're right, my friend. If I'm going to give my life, I want to take at least one U.S. ship with me. His friend's words sparked an idea in Nishina's mind. What if they used the submarines as torpedoes, man torpedoes? The two men exchanged a look, understanding each other without a single word. The war was going poorly for Japan. The Americans had far more ships and men, and so, the two friends began drawing up designs long before the infamous Kamikaze aircraft came into use. Kuroki and Nishina's plan, however, would apply the same desperate tactic underwater. They submitted their proposals, but officials ignored them. That changed when they rewrote the proposals in their own blood to prove their seriousness. Their radical plan to send a Japanese pilot to certain death was difficult for officials to accept. However, no one could deny the obvious utility of the plan, and so the Kaiten received a green light, albeit with the condition that the pilot be given an escape route, an idea the two designers soon abandoned as too complicated and unreliable to implement. Ultimately, the submersible was far from small, with a length of 14.7 meters, a diameter of 1 meter, and weighing 8 metric tons. On board, there was only a periscope, rudimentary controls, and for navigation, a gyroscope and a clock for timing turns. All of this served the sole purpose of delivering 1.5 metric tons of explosives to its target. Kaiten pilots were recruited from naval aviator training programs and officers. Thousands volunteered, but only a few hundred were selected. The chosen few were assigned to Kuroki and Nishina, who jointly trained them and tested the weapon. With no pilot manuals available, it was the task of both instructors and students to test the weapons for flaws and problems. During a training mission, Hiroshi Kuroki piloted an early version of the Kaiten off the coast of Otsushima. Faced with bad weather, Nishina desperately tried to dissuade his friend from diving. Despite the adverse conditions, Kuroki insisted on proceeding, reasoning that combat conditions would be similar. He submerged and continued the training. His Kaiten dove too deep, heading towards the seabed. Kuroki struggled with the controls. The rough sea and strong currents tossed him back and forth. "Come on, my beauty." But the harsh sea proved too much for the Kaiten. Out of control and to Hiroshi's horror, the submersible plunged downwards, crashing into the seabed. Hiroshi tried everything, but it was useless. The sea monster he had helped create had become his underwater prison. Silently, he cursed himself for abandoning the escape hatch design that the Japanese Navy had insisted upon. Yet, he also knew that the water pressure at this depth would have made using the hatch impossible. He quickly thought and tried to make noise. Every 5 minutes, he released air from the compressed air tanks, hoping the bubbles would indicate his position to the surface ships. However, on the surface, bad weather and sparse light rendered this plan futile. With no options left, Kuroki calmly took up a pen and wrote a detailed report, insisting that the accident was solely his fault, and that Nishina and all who had warned him about the bad weather bore no responsibility. He concluded the letter with the words, "Long live the Emperor, long live the Japanese Empire, long live the Imperial Navy." Finally, as is tradition in Japan, he penned his death poem, "This brave man, so full of love for his country that bidding farewell is difficult, calls out to his friends one last time, in the face of death." He was found dead 10 hours after the impact, having succumbed to oxygen deprivation. He was only 22 years old. The accident was devastating for Nishina, who had looked forward to dying a glorious death alongside his friend. Now, he was left to continue alone. Finally, the crews were declared ready for deployment, and the first mission was scheduled for November 20th, 1944. On November 6, the men held a celebration for the 12 lucky pilots chosen for the first attack, Nishina among them. They celebrated with sake and kachikure. Towards the end of the ceremony, they received swords and were allowed to give speeches. During his speech, Nishina announced that he would go into battle alongside his fallen friend, Hiroshi Kuroki. He would carry Kuroki's ashes aboard Kaiten No. 1, thus fulfilling his promise to attack enemy ships together. The next morning, the men boarded the 3 large submarines that would carry them near the operational area. On board, the submarine crews treated the pilots with the utmost respect. The crew solemnly watched as the 4 pilots boarded their respective Kaiten. "Kuroki and I are honored to be the first to use our weapon in combat. For Japan and the Emperor, The Japanese people will remember your honorable sacrifice. The crew of the I-47 presented the 4 Kaiten pilots with a painting, crafted by one of the crew members, depicting a Kaiten destroying an American ship. It was intended as a gift for the Emperor. The 4 pilots each entered their own Kaiten, and the mission began. Moments later, the locks disengaged, and the telephone line was cut. Nishina quickly took control of his machine and set off. Nishina heard underwater explosions and realized his friends were in trouble. He surfaced briefly and then surged forward. What he didn't know was that he was now the only Kaiten remaining, Japan's last hope for victory that day. The Americans were all intently scanning for periscopes, but Nishina, with his periscope retracted, was already on the final approach to the ship. He was now at full speed, approximately 55 kilometers per hour. The roar of the engine and the rush of the sea barely registered. It faded to a dull hum in the distance as he contemplated his destiny. "We made it, my friend." Nishina closed his eyes. His Kaiten's warhead struck the hull of the USS Mississinewa. The impact detonated the explosive charge. A colossal explosion ripped the enormous oil tanker in two, igniting a gigantic fire that illuminated the entire anchorage. Secondary explosions rocked the ship as its numerous fuel tanks erupted into brilliant orange fireballs. The vessel burned uncontrollably and sank, claiming the lives of 63 men. The submarine crew observed the explosions in the distance, convinced that all 4 Kaiten had been successful, and reported a much higher success rate than was actually the case. This false report inspired the Japanese to undertake further Kaiten missions, very few of which proved successful. In total, 106 young men sacrificed their lives as pilots of these fearsome machines. According to U.S. sources, only 3 ever hit their targets, claiming 187 American lives. These pilots, who voluntarily made the ultimate sacrifice and gave everything for their homeland, are honored at the Kaiten Memorial Museum, located in the very buildings on Otsushima Island where the men trained for their final missions.